Good afternoon and welcome to my 10th lecture on Final CA Auditing. There will be just two more videos which will cover the auditing standards entirely, but I will not be covering auditing standards from 700 onwards because it really doesn't make sense to summarize that. They are detailed formats like a letter where you have to read them, because the letters are addressed to the management. There is the auditor's opinion, there's the place, date, and sign off forming. So until you see the letters, you won't know where the auditor signs, where he puts his management letter, and a summary will really not serve any purpose. So again, you'll have to read the practice manual should be oneself for that. Okay, so let me start completing from where I left before. I'll be covering, and let me mention that I'll be completing that one standard auditing which I missed, which I think is 320 most probably, materiality in planning and performing an audit, in the last lecture, because I must have skipped my knowledge to cover that. So if you go through all these videos, you'll notice that I've summarized and covered all the standards on auditing in roughly one hour or 1 hour and 10 minutes. So that gives you a decent gist. However, this is not a substitute towards reading the summaries in Surbi Bansal, and if you only watch these videos, it will not completely serve your purpose. Let me be very honest over there. So after I complete all the videos, I will mention comments, mnemonics, and extra things which you may require. Any other doubt, any other further feedback, please mention them in the comments and I'll get back to you. This is an initiative which is completely free. Okay, this is not any commercial motive. This is an initiative to help students having May and November final CA examinations. Because when I came across a lot of videos, they were just initially demo lectures and then they said join our classes, pay this fees, pay that fees, which caused a lot of inconvenience for students because sometimes you're at a situation where just one day before the exam you need to revise something. So these are standards which are covered in entire detail except the last reports like SA580+, EOM, emphasis on matter and all that. All that I've not covered because you need to view them practically. Okay, so let's begin. Written representations. Written representations is what the auditor seeks from the management and which gives him audit evidence, but it does not give him sufficient and appropriate audit evidence regarding to the matters which he requires. So written representations is what the auditor seeks from the management. It does not include financial statements, books and papers at the assertion level, etc., but just certain matters which are specific and knowledge of which is required by the auditor. Okay, so written representation will be sought by the auditor from the management to see that the fundamental responsibilities of the management have been fulfilled in regard to the framework for the preparation and presentation of financial statements. Okay, so fundamental responsibilities. Then whether the information which the management is giving him, does it support the audit evidence? Okay, and whether reasonable reliance can be placed on the information which is given. Okay, so this is what is the objectives of written representation. I also mentioned it does not include financial statements, it does not include books and papers at the assertion level. It's just at a specific date, certain knowledge which is required by the auditor. So whom will the auditor ask this representation from, or whom will the auditor seek the representation from? From persons who have a responsibility of the management and those who have reasonable knowledge of the same. Okay, and the auditor will have to check whether the management has responsibly prepared the financial statements and relevant information as required by the auditor. Okay, as per the professional judgment of the auditor, relevant information has been provided to them. Now, what period should the written representations cover? They should cover the period up to the date of the audit report, but not after the date of the audit report. Okay, so all intervening transactions have to be completely covered. And okay, so here I mentioned that the period of the audit report. Now, what about the framework, the form? You understand what is the form and content of the audit report. So if the law and regulation already prescribes certain written matter to be prescribed by the management, then he did not seek written representation over there because it is already prescribed as per the governing law or regulation, right? And if the auditor has doubts about the written representation, now there are two situations: either the management has not provided written representation, or it has provided and the auditor has doubts about the same. So if it has not provided, he will give the impact on the financial audit report. He will mention that the information as required by the auditor was not provided to him because the shareholders need to have knowledge of whatever mismanagement is done by the entity, and this is always reflected in the audit report. So if it is not provided, or it is provided but the auditor has doubts, then he will conduct additional audit procedures, right? So again, I mentioned either the entity provides the written representation or does not provide. If it does not provide, then he will mention the impact on the audit report. If it provides, then he will mention if it has doubts on it. Okay, now certain other standards may also require written representation. So the auditor will consider those factors and again seek them from the management because a lot of other standards on auditing also require written representation. Okay, so this fairly covers SA580 written representation. Now let us go towards using the work of another auditor, which is SA600. So using the work of another auditor, this is again, when one auditor will require the work of another auditor because the work is too large for certain components, right? So there's a principal auditor and there's another auditor. But this auditing standard, don't mix it up, does not apply to joint auditors. It does not apply to predecessor auditors, that is previous auditors. SA600 using the work of another auditor does not apply to joint auditors, does not apply to predecessor auditors, does not apply to previous auditors. So when you're using the work of an auditor, this standard is very easy, very short. What are the factors that you will consider? The use of knowledge of the other auditor, the areas to be reported, right? The use of his audit report, if it is to be considered, any limitation imposed by the management, any findings which are important. Okay, so use of the audit report, his areas of knowledge, areas of significance, any limitation imposed by the management, significant findings of the other auditor, and he will consider all of them in the final audit report. So this may also happen when the auditor lacks knowledge on certain processes and he feels expert opinion is necessary. So he will use the work of another auditor. Again, it does not apply to predecessor auditor, does not apply to joint auditors. Do not mix them. Okay, so I covered the two standards and see you in the lecture ahead. I'll be continuing the remaining. Thank you for watching. All the best for your exam.